Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic today that might surprise you, especially as we get a little older: hearing loss.
Yeah,
And we're using this really cool Canadian resource guide. It's fascinating.
yeah,
It is.
it is. It's often called like a silent epidemic. It kind of creeps up slowly, and a lot of people don't realize it's happening until it really starts to impact their lives.
That's such a good point.
Mhm.
And this guide actually states that 1/3 of older adults experience hearing loss.
Wow.
1/3. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. A Canadian study found that only 8% of men and 5% of women self-report having hearing loss.
Hmm.
So why is there this big gap between the reality and what people perceive their own hearing to be?
It's like the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. The
Yeah,
gradual hearing loss is so subtle that it can go unnoticed, especially in those early stages. Think about it. You don't just suddenly become deaf one day.
right.
It's a slow decline, and your brain is so good at compensating for those small changes.
Yeah, we adjust to the new normal without even realizing it, which is kind of scary in a way.
It is. And that's why it's so important to be aware of those subtle signs. Have you ever noticed maybe in yourself or someone close to you difficulty understanding phone conversations?
Oh, yeah,
Or maybe struggling to follow group conversations, especially when there's a lot of background noise?
totally. Like going to a restaurant and having to pretend like you hear everything when you can only hear every third word.
Exactly. And then there's that classic, could you repeat that,
Oh,
please?
yeah, that's me all the time.
It's almost become like a running joke. But it can be an early warning sign that something's up. This guide even mentions turning up the TV volume louder than everyone else as another potential indicator.
Okay, now I know what you're thinking. This is just part of getting older. And while age-related changes in the ear do contribute, this guide really dives into some other major culprits, and that's where things get really interesting.
Right? Let's debunk this myth that hearing loss is simply a consequence of aging. One of the most significant factors often overlooked is long-term exposure to loud noise.
So you mean like standing right next to the speaker at a concert?
That's a big one. But it's not just about those occasional bursts of loud noise.
Oh,
It's the cumulative effect over time that really matters. Think about noisy workplaces, using power tools without ear protection, even listening to music through headphones at high volumes for hours on end. It all adds up.
wow, that's a wake-up call. Never thought about it like that. All those years of listening to my music really loud, it's going to catch up to me one day.
It's something that we often don't consider until it's too late. And it's not just loud noises either. This guide highlights the role of genetics and underlying health conditions. Did you know that conditions like hypertension and diabetes can be linked to an increased risk of hearing loss?
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
It all makes sense now, though. Everything's connected.
absolutely. And that brings us to another really crucial point. Hearing loss isn't just about missing a few words here and there.
Right.
It can have a much broader impact on our overall well-being.
So beyond the obvious frustration of not being able to hear clearly, what are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, imagine not being able to clearly hear important medical advice or warnings.
Oh, wow.
It could have serious implications for your health and safety.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how much we rely on our hearing for every little thing.
Exactly. And then there's that social and emotional toll that it can take. When communication becomes this constant struggle, it can lead to social isolation, strained relationships, feelings of depression.
So it's not just about hearing, it's about feeling connected and part of everything that's going on around you.
precisely. Communication is the foundation of human connection. When that's compromised, it impacts our relationships, our self-esteem, our overall sense of well-being.
This is getting heavy. But before we go too far down that road, let's look at something a little more empowering. This guide talks about some really cool coping strategies that people can start implementing right away.
That's right. Even simple changes can make a world of difference. For instance, talking openly with your loved ones about your hearing difficulties.
Yeah, sometimes just saying it out loud can help.
It can. It's all about fostering understanding and creating a more supportive environment. And that leads us to some other practical tips. Ask speakers to face you when they're talking, to articulate clearly, to repeat if necessary.
Right.
These might seem like small adjustments, but they can significantly improve communication.
It's also about being mindful of your surroundings, like choosing a quieter table at a restaurant, or making sure you can clearly see the person's face when they're talking.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that seeking professional help is not a sign of weakness, but a proactive step towards better hearing health. This guide emphasizes starting with your family doctor for a proper diagnosis and potential referral to specialists.
Speaking of specialists, that brings us to the world of assistive devices, and that's where we'll pick up after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We're back and ready to explore the world of assistive devices. It's not just about hearing aids anymore. There's a whole range of technology out there to help people with hearing loss.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, let's face it, hearing aids, the term itself doesn't exactly sound like cutting-edge, sleek technology,
Right.
but things have come a long way.
Okay, so let's break it down a bit. This Canadian guide mentions two main categories: prescription and over-the-counter hearing aids. What's the difference?
So in Canada, hearing aids are actually regulated as medical devices.
Okay.
So to get prescription hearing aids, you need to see an audiologist or a hearing instrument specialist
Right.
for a proper assessment and fitting.
Yeah.
And this makes sure that the devices are customized to your specific type and degree of hearing loss.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, everyone's hearing loss is so different. It's not like one size fits all, right?
Yeah. Exactly. You know, a hearing care professional can not only recommend the right type of hearing aid, but they can also fine-tune it to match your hearing needs and lifestyle
Okay.
and teach you how to use and care for them properly, too.
So you're getting expert advice the whole way through.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this guide mentions that prescription hearing aids in Canada can cost anywhere from like $1,500 to $2,000 each for a mid-level device. That's a pretty hefty price tag.
Yeah, it can be. But luckily, there are some provincial assistance programs
well,
that
sure.
can help offset those costs. It's definitely worth checking to see if you qualify for any financial support, depending on what province you're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good to know. Now, let's talk about over-the-counter hearing aids. These aren't currently available in Canada, but this guide does talk about the U.S., where they're starting to emerge as an option. Why is there a difference in approach?
It really comes down to those regulations.
Oh, okay.
Canada, they kind of have a more cautious approach,
Wow.
classifying hearing aids as medical devices that require a professional assessment and fitting. The U.S. has recently opened the door to over-the-counter hearing aids for certain types of mild to moderate hearing loss.
I see. So in Canada, it's more about personalized care and making sure that the devices are safe and effective.
Exactly. But the guide also raises some interesting questions about the potential impact of over-the-counter options maybe becoming available here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. They talk about Apple's AirPods Pro 2 and how they've actually been approved in the U.S. as over-the-counter hearing aids, which seems like a pretty big deal.
It is. The AirPods Pro 2, they let you take what's called a clinical level hearing test directly on your device.
Wait, a hearing test on your AirPods? How does that even work?
Well, it uses a series of tones and beeps to measure your hearing sensitivity at different frequencies.
Okay.
It's kind of similar to those basic screening tests that audiologists use. It's not a replacement for a full diagnostic evaluation by a professional.
Okay. So it's more like a starting point. Get a general sense of where your hearing's at.
Exactly. But think about the implications of that, right?
Yeah.
AirPods are already so popular, so mainstream. If they become kind of an entry point for people to explore their hearing health,
Right.
it could potentially reduce that stigma surrounding hearing loss,
Yeah.
encourage more people to seek help.
That's a really good point. It makes the whole process less intimidating, more accessible, especially for maybe younger people who are already really comfortable with that technology.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those barriers and normalizing the idea of, getting help with your hearing.
Yeah.
And speaking of assistive devices, we can't forget about those other options that are out there besides hearing aids.
Oh, right. This guide mentions assistive listening devices, ALDs.
Yeah.
These sound especially useful for situations where hearing aids might not be enough.
Exactly. So ALDs can be incredibly helpful in noisy environments. They work by amplifying the sounds you want to hear while reducing that background noise.
So it's kind of like having a personalized sound system. So you can just focus on the conversation or the speaker's voice.
Exactly. There are ALDs specifically designed for watching TV, attending lectures, or even, one-on-one conversations in those crowded restaurants.
Right.
And they can really make a huge difference.
And this guide also mentions alerting devices. These seem helpful for people who need a little bit more help beyond hearing conversations.
Right. Alerting devices use flashing lights or vibrations to signal things like doorbells, phone calls, smoke alarms, babies crying.
Oh, why?
They provide that extra layer of safety and awareness.
So technology is really trying to help people with hearing loss with all sorts of different solutions. Pretty impressive.
It really is. And as technology continues to evolve, we can expect even more, innovative solutions. The future of hearing assistance is looking bright.
This has all been really insightful, but before we wrap up, I think it's important to talk about that emotional and social aspect of hearing loss, which this guide touches on.
Absolutely. We've talked about the practicalities and the technology, but it's really important to acknowledge the impact that hearing loss can have on people's lives.
Right. It's about more than just not being able to hear.
Yeah,
It's about feeling connected, feeling confident, and engaged in your ability to communicate.
exactly. Hearing loss can affect relationships, self-esteem, and overall quality of life.
Right.
It can lead to those feelings of isolation, frustration, even depression.
Yeah. And this guide really talks about seeking support, not just from, healthcare professionals, but also from your loved ones.
That's right. Open communication is key. Talking about your hearing loss with your family, your friends, it can help them understand your needs,
Yeah,
and it can create that more supportive environment.
absolutely. It's also about advocating for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask people to speak clearly, repeat themselves, or face you when they're talking.
Exactly. Those little things make a big difference.
Yeah.
And remember, seeking help is not a sign of weakness. There are so many resources available,
Yeah.
from hearing care professionals to support groups to online communities.
You're absolutely right. So on that note, let's bring this deep dive to a close with some key takeaways and some final thoughts. Are you ready to wrap things up?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a really fascinating discussion.
It has.
So what do you think is like the biggest takeaway you want our listeners to have from this?
I think the most important thing is that hearing loss is so common,
Mm.
but it doesn't have to define you or your life. There's so much you can do to manage it effectively, from simple coping strategies to, you know, diving into that world of assistive devices. And, early intervention is key.
Yeah,
Don't wait until it starts really impacting your life to seek help.
that's so true. Just take control of your hearing health and realize that there's no shame in getting a little help.
Exactly.
And speaking of help, this guide actually does a really good job of talking about resources that are available, like the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. Yeah, they're a great organization. They offer a lot of, you know, information and support and advocacy for people with hearing loss and their families. They even have workshops on communication strategies and assistive technology. So
Oh, cool.
it's a good place to start.
That's awesome. So to wrap things up, let's bring it back to our listeners. Knowing what you now know about hearing loss, what is one small change that you can make in your own life? Or encourage in the life of someone you love?
It could be something as simple as just being more mindful of your noise exposure.
Yeah.
Turn down the volume on those headphones,
Yeah.
wear earplugs at concerts, or when you're using power tools,
hmm
be aware of those noise levels in your environment.
Yeah. Prevention is key.
Absolutely.
Or maybe it's starting a conversation with someone who you think might be having a little bit of trouble with their hearing.
Yeah,
Sometimes just acknowledging it can make a big difference.
it can. Or, maybe it's scheduling a hearing checkup for yourself. It's quick, it's painless, and it can give you some really valuable insights into your hearing health.
That's a great idea. So remember, taking care of your hearing is an investment in your overall well-being.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, empowering, and maybe even a little inspiring. Join us next time as we explore a completely different topic. Until then, happy listening.